So early in the month of September, we have our very first new Nintendo Switch Online games update with 4 different titles now being playable and available on the base tier service, mind you. So we are not talking about the expansion pack tier today, but rather 4 classic titles are now live for the SNES with Kirby Star Stacker. The NES has Joy Mech Fight and Downtown Neketsu March Super Awesome Field Day. I didn't read that title out loud until right now. That's hilarious. And Game Boy Color has Quest for Camelot. Now, full transparency, I don't know much about these games, but in today's video, I do want to boot them up together, share my initial impressions, and have a broad conversation on the state of Nintendo Switch Online and what we may be able to expect from future updates going forward. What's up, nation? Make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification if you haven't already. And as mentioned, guys, today we are going to take a look at the brand new Nintendo Switch Online update that dropped. This is exclusively for the base tier. And I will say at first glance, as mentioned in the intro, I'm not very familiar with these games. And a big issue that we do actually have with games as of lately on especially the base tier of this, which we'll hop into Mech Fight first, but as far as the base tier goes lately, we have not seen any kind of name brand games, if you will, kind of blockbuster, ones that you may have, that may have been my language select there, and I think I just picked Japanese. I'm kind of convinced, I haven't looked into the history of any of these games, but I actually think that multiple of these were Japan only releases because you kind of saw it in the box art there, like both the NES games had their box art as Japanese. So now we're reading Japanese text. We'll skip into some gameplay so I can talk about this briefly, but we have a lot to talk about with the base tier of NSO. Okay, so it looked like maybe that's the story mode that I got into and I pressed B instead of A. Well, I'm not entirely sure what's going on here, but we will do the one player versus com instead. And it looks like you have these various different mechs that you can pick from. This is a fighting style game. We will go with Mr. Purple here. I cannot read any of what's actually going on, but while we're figuring out the controls and kind of suffering through this thing, I will just say one big thing with SNES online updates on the base tier recently has really been the lack of anything like in terms of licensed games, if you will. Like, we know that there's a ton of Mega Man games sitting out there just ready to go. Maybe this is why this wasn't brought over to North America. It's far too difficult for our audiences. Not to mention I'm not the best at fighting games, but I'm just getting completely creamed here. We'll see if we can come back at all. It's one of those things that's really kind of more or less disappointing because while Nintendo is supporting, of course, a base tier subscription service, it is nowhere near the quality of titles that we see sometimes added into the expansion pack. Although I would argue that a lot of it has to do with Nintendo kind of starts off heavy with these services and gets you to subscribe for an annual membership, and then after a couple years goes by and the consoles are on there for longer, they really start to pull back as far as their frequency of updates and their quality of updates. And this is actually not a terrible game if you're just like, somebody who's super into fighting games and you really want to go deep as far as the history of them all. And I don't know how to do any of the special moves. I could probably do a lot more to figure that kind of stuff out, but anyway, this is what it is. It's pretty obvious. It's a simple fighting game. I don't think we'll check out the other NES one. I do want to spend a little bit of time with the Kirby game, which looked like a puzzle game from the trailer. And then lastly, we will definitely hop into the Game Boy edition because that's where you can argue that Nintendo maybe just doesn't want to spend the money on certain licensing fees. But on Game Boy, you would expect them to come out with a number of quality titles because they haven't really been around that long yet. So NES and SNES I've all but given up, and see, I don't even think none of these games that they put out have been localized at all, because unless if I missed it somewhere in the options and it wasn't obvious, there's not a way to select English as the language. So we're playing Japanese games released on Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pack, or just the base tier rather. And I will say that this is a pretty underwhelming update just at first glance. This is obviously somewhat of a play on a Tetris style game. I'm just going to assume that we're only worried about collecting or lining up the correct characters in a sequence. I don't know if those stars will actually burst or not, depending on how that works. So so there is a little bit of a thing where the stars, I guess what matters is as long as you are, oh no, we messed that up. As long as you are connecting the animals, whether they be through the stars or not, we're probably going to die here. But it looks to me, no, that's not going to work because we had another animal in between. So yeah, we are struggling here, guys. But I will say, I really hope that they go a lot heavier in with the Game Boy catalog. Like the fact that there are all these classic Pokemon games that are just sitting out there, and we switched that. Oh, can you switch it with that one too? The fact that there are all these Pokemon games that just quite honestly are sitting there waiting to be added. That's a shame. I mean, the Pokemon Company at the most recent Pokemon Presents really was hoping we would see something from them in the form of this is going terrible. Really was hoping we would see something in the way of Pokemon games being added in, but of course we did not. And I don't know when Nintendo's going to try to, finally decide to do some of the big titles that people want to play. And so, with where we're at now in the NES and SNES, as I mentioned, I kind of given up all hope on having any kind of major game updates. But for the Game Boy, that's quite the opposite. I definitely think they still have a number of quality titles that they could go, starting with Pokemon. So this one's very hard to actually talk and film at the same time. I will say that, guys, right now. Like, I have zero ability to do a strategy puzzle game like this and have a conversation. All of that said, I definitely think that where we're headed from here with updates, well, that's a surprising chain of events. I did not expect to clear that much space off of the stage. Are we just gonna like beat the stage now? I really think that whenever we talk about the future of NES and SNES updates from here, if Nintendo doesn't go the route of like Mega Man and Goof Troop and the Mickey Mouse games, spend some money on the licensing, it's just going to be more and more underwhelming. It's going to be games you've never heard of. It's going to be non-localized ports, and that really is disappointing. I will say, with subscription prices going up everywhere, like PlayStation recently had a massive increase to their online price. Nintendo doesn't look like quite as bad of a value as it once did compared to the competition, but it still struggles at times to really be worth its asking price, and I think that mainly comes down to what games catalog is Nintendo going to stick with. And we're going to hop out of that and just briefly check out the Game Boy game last. But I go back and forth so much on NSO just because sometimes it seems like Nintendo's really leaning forward with a healthy round of updates, and we get them somewhat frequently. We had a huge gap in N64 games, which was a big issue for me. 4 full months without seeing an N64 game added onto the expansion pack tier, and then of course we got 2 in the same month, so that was kind of a win. But with Excite Bike 64 and then Pokemon Stadium 2 before it. But again, there's a lot more that Nintendo can be doing with the service, and I really just hope that we see them get a little bit more aggressive with the picks. Now, Quest for Camelot, this is one that, I'm reading the title, so I actually do know what it is. I have not played this, but at the very least, compared to the other games, it is a localized game, so we can say that as a win. I wonder if any of you have heard of this game before, and it almost rings a bell, but I have not played it. So let me know if you have any level of nostalgia for it. This is, of course, a Game Boy original game, so whenever it comes to things like graphics and story, we are just reading text here, which we'll go ahead and skip past so I can show you guys some gameplay while we're discussing this. So I think that entire time I was able to like hit the start button and skip all of that, because that was a very lengthy cutscene, and or if you could call it that. It was a few different screens with text back and forth, and then of course some like drawn up images, but we will see what we have going on here. This immediately it kind of gives me some of these like, Legend of Zelda type vibes, because I have a sword down there and just this top down view as we're controlling our character. I do like one thing, either I can't use my sword or I have to equip it somehow. I will say one thing that I like about Game Boy games though, is just the simple fact that like the sprites are so large, because they had to do that for the screen, that whenever you play it on a modern day TV, it actually looks pretty decent in terms of its immersiveness. We will see what we need to do to get our sword here. None of my buttons are working, so let's investigate this issue. So I think the deal is even though there's a sword icon with like what looks like a X1 next to it, I don't think that I have a sword, so I think I'm just supposed to basically run around and survive. I won't be able to really spend enough time in this game to give it a true impression, but I will say out of the 3 so far, if maybe this is one that you have some level of nostalgia for, I can see this maybe being the highlight out of the entire edition, unless you really like puzzle games. That Kirby one, not bad. Definitely, has a learning curve to it with getting used to all the different shapes and logos you need to get used to in order to, and characters and things to be able to chain combo correctly. But this is like, you get, you know, obviously I have a bar of hearts down there, and I don't know if I'm backtracking now. It seems like I might be. We don't have any kind of like clear direction in this game. I'm sure that guy that I just skipped past all his text probably told me what to do, but that is okay. This is the latest round of updates on NSO. It's an underwhelming one for me. Maybe it's not for you. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any level of nostalgia for any of these games and you're excited to get into them for the first time or back into them. I can definitely tell you that, you know, unless you grew up in Japan, you probably don't have a whole lot of nostalgia for 3 out of the 4 that were added, because it does seem like they were games that were maybe released over there. But if you know the history, let me know that as a bonus in the comments down below as well, because I did not look into any of that before filming the video. I just wanted to do some initial boot up and gameplay impressions. And hey, at the very least, we're starting off September with somewhat of a good news foot with a new Nintendo Switch Online update. There's a lot of reason to expect a Nintendo Direct is right around the corner, so we'll be talking about that here on the channel in upcoming videos. And you know, Quest for Camelot, good enough. I would say that probably the Kirby one maybe is the highlight for me, other than I do think this game may have potential if you give it enough of a chance and kind of get into it more. But I really want to hear from you guys on what games you hope we see from here when it comes to the base tier service and even the expansion pack, but specifically the base tier. Do you think Nintendo will actually spend some money on licensing dollars and get some classic games that are missing from the service right now? Or do you think that more of these no-name or never brought over games to the US is what we'll see from here with things like the NES, SNES, and even the Game Boy family of systems when it comes to Nintendo Switch Online? So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.